Good morning. It's February 28th. We're here for our regular scheduled commissioners meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners. We have the administrator, Mr. Davidson, and the clerk of the board. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join me in the pledge. Okay, the first item on the agenda is Potts and Associates legislative update. Are they on the phone?
Yes, sir.
All righty, well, you've got the mic.
Oh, man, that's always a scary and dangerous thing. Thank you for trusting me with it. So this week, I really appreciate your time. This is a pretty short report this week. We just got through cutoff last Friday, which was the last cutoff for policy committees. So allegedly, any bills that haven't made it out of a committee at this point in time will be dead until next year. It is important to remember two things. Number one, the legislature can deem a bill necessary to implement the budget at any point in time throughout session until the gavel drops on the last day. And number two, all of these bills that were introduced this year, even if they're dead, they will be back next year for consideration. And there's a lot of different ones that are going to return. One of the things that's kind of been interesting about this session, I'll make a quick comment to, I guess, how the feel on the Hill is and what everything looks like and how the interactions are going between the governor's office, the attorney general, and then both houses of the legislature. It's been really interesting this year, and it is of note that the governor and the attorney general have asked for quite a few different bills. One, for example, would have been the riparian areas, which is the 1215, which was completely replaced by a brand new bill, because what happened on that bill is all the stakeholders, Democrats, Republicans, the tribes, the counties, cities, farmers, agriculture, everybody got together and said this bill really doesn't work for us, and they worked out a compromise. And everybody, and it wasn't necessarily just a compromise where somebody lost and some people won and people gave up. They worked out a bill that really worked. The reason they had to drop a new bill on that one was because the governor's office pulled their support. And they said, we do not want you running it on our ask bill, drop a new one. What is happening is right now it kind of feels like over there is the governor and the attorney general are pushing really hard on some issues, and the legislature is saying, okay, that's just a bridge too far. We want to pull it back a little bit, and then there's not much negotiation coming out of the administration. So it's going to be interesting as we come down into the end of session. The governor has kind of shown in the past that he tends to veto things and hold the veto power kind of over the legislature's heads to get a few things that he wants every year. That will come into play as we get down to the end of session. I don't know what that's going to be, but even his own party isn't necessarily seeing eye to eye with him. Case in point, the Attorney General and Governor's firearm ask bill. The Sheriffs and Police Association came out very hard against that, and in response, the Attorney General asked for House Bill 1445, which is a second substitute House bill at this point in time. And that one I did include in my report for you, what 1445 does, and I will give you a disclaimer. I am not an attorney, so I definitely recommend that you have your attorneys go read that bill. I did include a link in my report to the actual bill analysis, and you can read the bill documents because it's changed a bunch. But in essence, that was the response to the Police and Fire Association saying, we do not like your firearms regulations that you're putting out, Governor and Attorney General. We may not enforce them. We may decide on our own as a sheriff or as a police chief that your rule or your law, your regulation that you pass, if you guys pass this law, we may decide that it is not constitutionally or constitutional. It does not align with the United States Constitution. That was the message they gave in committee testimony, and in response to that, the Attorney General and Governor dropped this bill, which basically, in one way or another, it allows the Attorney General to investigate a local authority, whether it's a city or a county, the commissioners, the police chief, the prosecutor, anybody at the local level. And one of the things about this bill is it doesn't necessarily require a pattern of behavior to be established by the individual or the office that they investigate. It just has to have one instance of misbehavior, bad behavior, misrepresentation, breaking the law, not following a Washington state law. It also invokes the U.S. Department of Justice in some cases. So I will leave you with that and recommend that you have your county attorney, your prosecuting attorney, whoever you have review those things, look at that, and it would definitely be worth comment. Right now, let me make sure. There's a lot of floor action going on. Very few committees this week. We're getting run lists for the House and the Senate on the floor every day. They're starting early, and they are going until they're done. Sometimes they're quitting at 5, sometimes it's 8 or later. As we get closer to the next cutoff, which is next Wednesday, they'll probably run even later. After next Wednesday, again, this is allegedly, if a bill doesn't get passed out of the House of Origin, it is considered dead for this session. That doesn't mean, again, that they can't go back and pull a bill up if they need it to pass the budget. Budget provisos were all due by last Friday, so anything that's in the budget right now, it's all in there, and then they'll go through and parse it down as they come to the end of session. Right now, that Bill 1445 is still in rules on second reading, means they could pull it to the floor at any time. We're watching these just to, at this point, there's not a whole heck of a lot we can do with where they sit other than watch and tell people, hey, we'd prefer to see them or not see them once they're sitting in rules. Another one that is of interest, especially to the rural areas that we've been watching, policy-wise, House Bill 1832. This is specifically talking about implementing a mile charge on vehicle usage on public roadways. At this point, the bill didn't make it out of the Transportation Committee, so it is dead. That said, it will come back next year. This is the bill that basically the legislature has realized that they are losing money for transportation because cars are becoming more fuel efficient and electric vehicles don't use any gasoline, and that's where a lot of the transportation revenues come from. So one of the things that they're looking at is allowing citizens to self-report. You say, I drove this many miles in Washington State this year, and so tax me on the miles that I drove. Or they can put a tracker on your car, GPS tracker. A lot of electric vehicles have that anyway. Or the other option would be to, and I don't know if this is very viable, but they had conversations about sending an inspector around. You can call and have your vehicle's odometer read by a professional. Since we got rid of emissions testing in Washington State, they don't really have anywhere that they can do that. They don't have anywhere to send people where they have trained officials to do that. So it's not really a viable answer. And then, much like in Franklin County, you guys, what happens when somebody drives in Oregon for half the time? There were kind of exceptions for vehicles that were used on the farm, not on the roads, whether it's a maintenance rig or field truck or something like that. They did make allotments for that, but I think they really couldn't get over really two facts on this bill. Number one, people don't really want to be tracked, and they don't really want somebody checking their odometer. And there's just some operational, just logistical questions there. And then the fact that the money isn't guaranteed to stay in the transportation budget, and I think that was one of the big rubs. So it's really interesting coming back to the feel this year that we're seeing. A lot of the conversation is shifting this year as we look at this. The conversation is coming in where the legislatures are starting to say, if we're putting money into a program, we want it to stay there. We don't put it there so that in the next budget cycle we can take it out and use it for the general fund or operational budget or, something other than what it was intended. So there have been quite a few bills that really just haven't moved this year that had a fiscal note or provided financing to different programs just because the legislators knew that this is a good bill and they knew that if they put the money there, it would grow. Public Works Assistance is a great example, but they knew that it would get stolen. So in terms of money, there is another bill on here, and since I'm talking about it, it's House Bill 1670. And this bill would raise the 1% property tax limit to 3%. I'm going to make sure where it was. I got to check on these. I do apologize. So it is still in rules right now in the House. And what this bill would do would be raise your cap that you can raise property taxes on an annual basis from 1% to 3%. There's a lot of conversation back and forth on this bill specifically. One of the benefits of it is it would give you more latitude and flexibility to raise money on a local level if you need it. The other thing is you got to do that and you got to live with the people that you're taxing. The other side of the bill, I guess the con, one of the drawbacks to this, Commissioner Dansel, who is a former Senator, Dansel, out of Ferry County, out of Republic, brought up a really, really good point in the steering committee. And I have no opinion. If you guys can tell one way or the other what you would like to do if they do bring it to the floor, I'll tell you kind of what's happening on that in a second. But Commissioner Dansel said, inside those caucus rooms, the conversation isn't necessarily about how do we help the counties. The conversation is, have they raised taxes to the highest point that they possibly can? Are they out of resources at the local level to raise money? And if the answer is no, they're not out of resources, no, they haven't raised the taxes as high as they possibly can, and they still need more money, then the legislature is basically saying in the caucus rooms, they're saying, well, then the county doesn't need any money from us. And that was Commissioner Dansel's feedback on that bill. I can tell you the legislators kind of have that same opinion. The Republican caucus dropped about 35 amendments on that bill, floor amendments. So that was kind of a pretty solid message to the speaker that we don't really want to hear this bill, but if we are going to hear this bill, you're going to be here all day. So I don't know that it'll move forward. If it does, I would say it would probably be because there was some negotiation that got something else done in the future or something like that. So I don't think it's a huge issue right now. However, it is something we definitely want to watch. The other thing that we're overall watching across the entire session here, and this is a lot of generalities because the specifics, we'll come back into those here after the cutoff. We are watching a couple of different things. We are watching right now intent language in bills. And this is something that the public, unless you go and read the bill itself, you will not see this. And once the bill is passed, you will not see this in the law. It doesn't actually hit code, but they put in the intent language that guides how each different administrative arm, whether it be ecology or Department of Agriculture or whatever, all these agencies, how they implement these bills. Some of the stuff that they're talking about that could be a little bit scary is they're starting to cite fact or make declarative statements on fact and then say we are going to take this action. And that's what frames the rulemaking process. However, the fact that they stated it has no supporting evidence, so the agency doesn't really have any real guidance on how they're supposed to make their rules. For example, they've said in several bills, because of the climate emergency, the Washington State Legislature has determined that we need to do this action to fix this problem, whatever that might be. And then they just go on with what they need to do. The issue with that is, what part of the climate emergency? Is this a water issue? Is this a temperature issue? Is this a snowfall issue? Is it a wind issue? What is the problem? So they're not giving the agencies a lot of guidance. They're just saying there's a climate emergency. We got to fix the problem. Here's what we're going to do it. and it's pretty open. So that's a little concerning. The other thing that we're watching very closely this year is specifically bills that are optional, voluntary. And Commissioner McKinney at the steering committee here last week, 2 weeks ago, brought up a really good point. She said a lot of these bills that we see come in as voluntary have a way of turning into mandatory in 3 to 5 years. So, there's a lot of concern, or people are really leery over these voluntary optional bills, whether it's a fundraising mechanism or another regulation. But we're watching that, and I think with that, that's a big bundle of stuff to think about. Do you guys have any questions or clarifications or any bills specifically that you want to see? Anything you want us to push on, try and pull out of rules?
Commissioners, any questions? I was alerted by a representative of 1333. What's the status on that one?
Let me pull it up,
House
see
Bill
where they're at.
1333.
Yeah, I'm pulling her up. Let me tell you right where it is today. It was on the list of, that is sitting in rules right now in the House on second review. They could pull it. That one has received quite a bit of pushback again from the Police and Fire Association and citizens in general, and I understand where your concern is on that.
And then one other, is there any bills introduced in regard to this climate crisis? And it's about carbon that, we were supposed to be exempt, is what I understand, from the carbon fee on fuel, the farmers, but we have been charged it now this year so far. Has there been any bill introduced for the compensation of oxygen that we produce through photosynthesis on these farms and the plants that we produce?
The answer to that is no. There are some of the big agricultural companies are registering carbon offsets for agricultural producers, but that has nothing to do with what's going on the state level. Because I see your point is the crops that the farmers produce are turned into a product which weighs something, is built of carbon, and then is consumed by humans. That would be considered carbon capture. And no, there hasn't been anything considering that fact this year.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Mullen had a question too, did you?
On 1832, is that only with gas-powered vehicles, or does that apply to diesel-powered vehicles?
The 1832 would be on, that's one of the questions. How about that? It would be on all vehicles if it went into full force.
So Zach,
it would be on diesel, it would be on gas. You would get something akin to a farm exemption for the miles that you drove a truck or whatever it was in the field.
Zach, this is Commissioner Peck. The 1832, the RUC charge, does not apply to diesel-powered vehicles. Some point in the future, it might, and you're correct. Any miles driven on private property or out of state would not be charged a mileage charge as well.
And that was part of their question, because they didn't have any good reason or any good way to fix that. Thank you for pointing that out, Commissioner Peck.
Yeah, and the
That
real
is right. I was
issue,
just reading through that.
candidly, the discussion at Wasatch and in the legislature has been around the fact that if you put it on diesel, then you're going to have to carve out for commercial trucking. And I think that was a political hill that they did not want to try and climb. Wanted to mention that in a previous board meeting in discussing legislation, in talking about the 3/10 bill, some of the information coming out of the legislature initially said that the 3/10 would allow counties to take the traditional 1% increase over the previous year's actual dollar collection, that's referred to as 101%, plus inflation, plus population growth, altogether not to exceed 3%. That's either changed or the information's been updated, but it no longer includes the 101%. So it would be a 3% cap, and it would be predicated on population growth and inflation. And I was sitting there with Commissioner Dancel, former Senator Dancel from Ferry County, when we had the discussion that, Zach, you were just talking about, and he was very clear about the fact that the legislature's focus is that unless and until counties have enacted every tax for which they already have authority, they're not going to be sensitive to unfunded mandates at the county, like our unfunded costs for public defense and for elections and other activities. So this is really, in my view, a play to give us a 3% authority so that they can come back and say, we're not paying for anything until you've taxed your people to the maximum. Thanks.
So, well, you guys don't have any other questions, I will let you get on to your next order of business, and I appreciate your time very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Zach, before you go, are you going to be at LSC?
I will.
Okay, we'll see you there. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, guys.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the special meeting, February 13th. Is there any additions, revisions, or corrections?
No.
Seeing none, they're approved. Okay, and then down to the vouchers. I think we have one voucher today.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $710,866.65 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the Auditor's Office and the County Administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next is the consent agenda. There are 7 items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda, 7 items as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. I'd like some discussion on item 5, if we may. Craig, yeah, could I ask you a few questions on this? Reading through this, Craig, I see that we were awarded $327,000. Total cost was $201. It leaves a difference of $76. Can we use that on another project for a bridge?
If the funding came for a specific task.
Project.
Generally, the money that's left over has to be returned into that grant fund.
Okay. I was just curious if we could use that on another project for a bridge, because we have a lot of bridges that need to be worked on.
Yes, we do. We're working on it.
That was my one and only question. Thank you, sir. So there's been a motion and a second for the 7 consent items. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
You sure?
We have somebody coming to the mic.
I'm Todd Van Allebeck, Franklin County Fire District 2 Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Recently, last week, you held a special meeting in Connell. Appreciate that. There are several topics for discussion. One of them was for funding for a new fire hall in Clotis, hospital district, EMS, and that's the main one I would like to talk about because it's crucial. It's completely beneficial, but I mean, I know our EMTs at the hospital district, or even District 3, even Pasco Fire, they've been helping out the, District 2 immensely, and we appreciate it. But I, hope you can address that issue and help us resolve it, because we have no EMS other than Lifelight, and, the other districts helping as well. And we're creating a tax burden for those other districts that needs to be rectified as well. Thank you.
And may I ask, I know this is public comment, but Life Flight, you have to have the approval by an ambulance for that to be deployed, right?
I'm not square on that issue, actually.
Can the fire chief deploy that?
I believe we can,
Okay.
yeah. I may be wrong on that, but
We're
I'm
looking
willing to
into
dive
it
into
right
it,
now.
yeah,
Yep.
so.
All right. Well, thank you.
But, and
Appreciate
as far
it.
as the Lifelight goes, that's, that's personal investment on our part. If we want to, make it to see tomorrow, we you know, either have a yearly plan or a lifelong plan or so. But anyway,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
Go ahead, caller, you have 3 minutes.
First of all, a couple months back, Clint Didier discussed how he heard they were shipping the homeless and the drug addicted from Seattle over here. You know, I was a Boy Scout leader as a kid, and had I led my troop on speculation and hearsay, my dad would have rightfully took me out to the woodshed and flogged me. It's no way to lead. The only thing you do is lead people into fear and speculation, which is servitude. I wish I could deal with intellectual thinkers, not people riddled with concussion-like syndrome behavior. Second of all, I only speak in detail and give information the way I do because of retaliatory comments made by elected officials. Third, I'm a caller, and I don't attend the meetings anymore because the last time I spoke out, the last time I used my freedom of speech, and accused elected official Jim Raymond of felony conspiracy, the very next time I attended, I was, well, you can see that on Facebook because it was leaked out by a whistleblower. And it reminds me of this moment. It's like rain on your wedding day. I apologize. It's like a free ride when you've already paid. And the most important thing to remember is that disorderly conduct, a police officer cannot legally be disturbed by citizens' conduct. This has been affirmed by the United States Supreme Court multiple occasions. See, that's why when you're an officer or an officer of the law, you swear to know the most current laws of the Supreme Court and those rulings. Because, well, when it's several times noted in the Supreme Court, reasonability and reasonableness doesn't apply. So, also, some people have disabilities that cause them to say words and to feel anxious and to be afraid of things. And when you don't give them the dignity and the ability to treat them civilly and human, sometimes people with Tourette syndrome and other syndromes say things like, fuck.
Cut him off. Is he off? Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Anybody else on the phone?
Go ahead, caller, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead, caller, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is LaWanda Hatch. I apologize for my voice. I have a little bit of laryngitis today, which is why I'm not in the meeting. But I just wanted to kind of go over some points that were made by the Public Works Director last week. And I did go out on our county roads and take some pictures just to verify what I'm speaking about. Anyhow, so I sent that to two of our commissioner email addresses if they get the opportunity this week to look at that. But I would like from our Public Works Director, if our commissioners could get that, or county administrator cite the farmer that is getting permits every year to harvest and plant. I would also like the date cited when this ordinance was passed for the county, because the state law says they may, and in other parts of that law, it does say use the language shall. So may indicates it depends on zoning rules within different parts of the county. And also, he had talked about safety and gravel on the roadways causing accidents. So I would like him to please cite accidents that are on the county roads where gravel on the pavement was the cause. I want to remind the commissioners that all county roads, they're soft shoulders of gravel and dirt. So to say that a gravel and dirt road butting up against a gravel and dirt shoulder would cause accidents is kind of silly in a way. But I can tell you, I've lived out here for 36 years, and we have never known any accident to be caused by gravel on the driveway. In fact, the asphalt is paved with the gravel and then the oily tar product that actually is how the gravel just constantly just sinks into the asphalt. So those are just some things points I didn't make in my email that I'm hoping to get answers to those questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else in the room or on the phone? Nobody else on the phone? Anybody else in the room for public comment?
Commissioner,
Yes.
I did receive one text here with a picture, and it says, does Clint have cooties or something? Probably because of the seating arrangements.
Yeah, I was
And
going to
so-
make the comment that the county's not lining up against the chairman. It's the fact that the mic right here wouldn't work, so we had to get to a mic that would work, but
I thought that needed to be explanation. We were not being.
I was going to
opposition.
explain that in our updates, but thank you, Mr. Davidson, or whoever texted that in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did shower this morning too, so. So let's go to the commissioner administrator updates. Mr. Davidson?
Basically, my report, you gentlemen were at the external meetings that I was at, first starting off with the bi-county meeting over at Benton County with Benton County Commissioners that I thought went very well, discussing our bi-county operations. I think it laid a good framework for future discussions as we went through each one, one by one, and I think that's going to lead to a lot of good, I think we got a lot of good direction from both boards combined, and we'll be able to work through various issues with the help of working with the county administrator and the assistant administrator from Benton County. Follow up that night with, I thought was a very successful meeting with the fire districts. I really appreciated the participation of the board traveling up there and the turnout that we had from all the fire districts. I think we really had a lot of good feedback, and I think we're on the road of helping ensure that we'll have countywide EMS services. I think that that's really important that we do that, and I think that we've got some ideas in the mix to achieve that. So. Big kudos, a big thanks goes out to Chief Mike Harris from Fire District 3, who did an excellent presentation, I felt, and also Chief Bob Gear, who was there. That I think that those two gentlemen really provided a lot of good information for us. So,
Commissioner Mullen?
So last week had the Washington Highway Users Federation legislative briefing. The Board of Health meeting was canceled last week. Also attended the special bi-county meeting. Benton County has signed a lease with the Welsh's Grape Juice Factory or building for the Recovery Center. Plan is to add a lot of windows to upgrade the building to try to change its appearance so it's not so gloomy and depressing looking. So they do have plans to update that building. Should take a couple of years to complete. Also at the meeting, there was a spokesperson, and I apologize for not catching his name or his company, but they said that they currently occupy the first floor of the Tri-City Herald building and say they can offer 23-hour care almost immediately, and I know that Matt Rasmussen said he was going to reach out to him. Also attended the Connell meeting with the fire districts and the EMT services, and there is most definitely a need to address the ambulance and EMT services out there with Connell, Colotas, Palouse Falls, Lions Ferry, and surrounding areas. I just want to say special thanks to all the volunteers in the EMT and fire districts out there. Without them, we wouldn't have any programs. And it's quite a commitment to volunteer for those items, so I just want to say thank you. Also want to say thank you for everyone involved in the meeting, and people went out of their way to make the room accessible, and I even noticed our county administrator and clerk of the board cleaning up chairs afterwards, along with even people from the IT department. So I just want to say a special thank you for going out of your way on that. Also attended the Cattleman's Banquet. There was over 500 people in attendance. The money raised from this event goes towards youth programs and scholarships. It's a very beneficial program to support our youth throughout Franklin County, and it was a great success. and also participated in the HAPO Center County Administrator interviews yesterday. And I just want to say something else too. It's not really county business, but out on the PK Highway, I keep seeing people drop their dogs off. And it's got to be the utmost cruelty for your animal. Just for their information, if they're watching, I mean, their dog chased them for over half a mile trying to get back to them. So it's just discouraging to see that. And we see dogs dropped out there all the time. It's sad. Thank you.
Commissioner Peck.
Participated in most of the meetings that have already been discussed by Mr. Davidson and Commissioner Mullen, with the exception of the road committee you mentioned. Had a 2-hour meeting last Thursday with the risk pool, getting an update on policies and procedures. If you're not familiar with the Washington County's risk pool, it is the insurance company that Franklin County uses. Relatively complex arrangement of insurers and reinsurers to try and keep our insurance costs down. And the key takeaway from the whole 2 hours was the single best thing that we as a county can do to reduce our insurance costs is to reduce claims. And even one county doing a great job of reducing claims is not enough. We need to get most of the counties to start reducing claims. It's a combination of the number of claims and the high dollar amounts that juries are awarding is what's driving up county insurance costs, which are up double digits again this year. Had the same meetings yesterday with candidates for a county administrator position. Attended the meetings in Connell, as I've already mentioned. Had the legislative update with Washington State Association of Counties last Friday. And I think everything else would just be a repeat of what's been said. So thank you.
So last week was a so-so week until Thursday, and then Thursday, I just want to thank the clerk of the board and the administrator for meeting every Thursday morning at 7 to go over our agenda for this meeting every week, because preparation is key to success. It was that way in the NFL, and it's that way in government. And I appreciate you two taking the time to meet with me every Thursday morning at 7 to go over this agenda and to put it in place. And then after that, I had to Port of Pasco. I only was able to stay on for an hour because we had the pre-certification with the election board and then the certification on Friday. And we had our bi-county meeting over in Kennewick, which I thought was, again, to reiterate, a huge success. Communication is key to success. And as I said in that meeting, I thoroughly believe that we may be two different counties, but we're one community. And to work together is an economical savings to the taxpayers, because we are saving them a great deal of tax money if we try to take on all these by ourselves until we can afford it. And then, of course, we had the fire and EMS meeting up in Connell, and I want to thank everybody for showing up, because, again, it takes a collective coming together and finding solutions, and District 2 does not have EMS, and I know that District 1 hospital and District 3 are covering them. And it is causing our volunteers great fatigue, and it's putting those areas in jeopardy. If the ambulance is going to District 2 and we have a call or have an emergency, then we are suspect to other volunteers coming forward to run the second ambulance. So it puts our districts in jeopardy, and it is depleting our resources. So I appreciate you coming today. Thank you very much, because we have talked on the phone. And I am very encouraged by the fact that you are looking into trying to get some volunteers, so thank you for coming today. And then the candidate forum for the administrator job was yesterday, and it was 3 people who have come to the final, and we interviewed them, and then we had our department heads and our electeds also go and visit with them, and we're going to hear from them later. So that is the end of my presentation, and we'll move down to the regular business. First one is selling of 11 certain tax title properties.
Yes, so the Treasurer's Office could.
From the Treasurer's Office, if they would come forward, please.
And Chairman Didier?
Yes.
As we begin this regular business discussion, Treasurer Josie Kelser is ill today and was not able to make it, but I did have some talk with her today, and there are issues, and I also had a talk with Craig Ergman, our county engineer. Number D, item D, is a little bit of concern to us. It's one of our storage yards that we utilize currently. We are actually losing another storage yard, which is putting kind of a burden on Public Works Department right at this time. So I'd like to have discussions with both the Treasurer's Office and Public Works about this parcel just a little bit more before we took action. So that just one parcel, if we could table that for the time being, if it's okay with the Treasurer's Office.
Okay, so item D will be tabled to further,
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
point of order, Commissioner Peck.
No one, Commissioner, Chair, or anybody else has the authority to table an item that's already on the agenda. I'd like to have discussion about it and like to keep it on the agenda. Certainly, additional discussion is necessary, but it's neither the county administrator's position to propose tabling nor any one commissioner's. I think we should talk about it for a minute. I don't anticipate asking for any action today, but it's on the agenda, and people may be here to hear about it. So I'd like to speak to it.
Okay, so we'll just continue on with item A then. We'll start with item A.
Sure, and so we kind of broke it down into 4 different sections. I think you guys had it all in your read ahead as far as how it was broken down, but we have a total of 30 tax title properties. Some of them go back into 1930s, and what tax title properties are, they're properties that were foreclosed on, nobody bid it on, they were never sold, and then they become part of the tax title with the county. They're not Franklin County assets, they're just properties that we hold in a trust until we are able to sell them again and put them back on the tax roll. That's a key and important factor because they are not just Franklin County properties. Those are properties that belong to all the taxing districts. And so what we're doing here today is we've had, as a Treasurer's Office, we receive requests by individuals who want to bid on these properties, and we're the only way we're able to sell these is by bringing them in front of the board and opening up to either an auction or a private negotiation based on the criteria or based on the actual property. And so what we have in front of you guys today is A, all the properties that were deemed worth less than $500 as standalone parcels. There's a RCW that allows us to negotiate privately with the adjoining owners and of the properties. And so that's what the first ASR in front of you and resolution is. It's for a total of 11 parcels that, according to the assessors, as a standalone parcel, they're worth less than $500. In your guys' books that you should have received beforehand, there was pictures and links to those actual properties that show what they are. Most of them are either like a fence line or a sliver of land going between somebody's property that, for whatever reason, back in the day was a divided parcel.
Questions?
Just an observation. I think when we have agenda items and they are talking about the sale of land perceived to be owned or controlled by the county, and it says by private negotiation, it raises some eyebrows. So I just wanted to add for the record what you already well know, which is the value of these properties is so low that the cost of selling them through any kind of a public process like an auction or something would risk costing us as much as the county would gain. So just the notion of selling any county asset by private negotiation, I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Thanks.
And these are properties small enough they cannot be built on, correct?
And we have the
Different
next
category.
resolution is the ones that are non-buildable. They double dip, but most of them, if they're $500 or less, they're non-buildable too.
Okay.
And so there's an RCW out there, 36, 35, 150, that states both. If it's under 500 or if it's non-buildable, they could be a private negotiation, which usually is interpreted by most counties as you could reach out to adjoining owners and say, hey, look, this is your fence line. For whatever reason, it's never transferred when you bought this house. You could.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of Resolution 2023-066 in the matter of selling 11 certain tax title properties by private negotiation.
Is that 6-6 or 6-3?
The agenda says 6-6.
So my book says 063 on item B. It's A? Okay.
This was the agenda laying here at the commissioner's desk when we came in this morning. Sounds like there's new information. Resolution 2023-063 appears to be the correct title. And would just
No,
ask,
no, you had it right, Commissioner Peck. There's a new agenda, and Rocky has the old agenda. Commissioner Mullen has the old agenda, so it is 2023-066. You were right.
thank you. I misunderstood the clerk's comment.
All right, thank you. Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-066. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to B, selling of 10 non-practical, which is Resolution 2023-064, just for clarity. Please go
And-
ahead.
Yeah, and same idea. These are, so we sent a list of all the parcels that are in tax title to planning and building, and these are the parcels that planning and building came back and said, hey, they're non-buildable parcels as a standalone parcel, and so that gives us the authority to, again, private negotiation with the adjoining owners and parcels around. And so these are what these parcels are. And most of them are, all but 3 of them are also the under $500 value. So they're just little pieces of sliver of land.
Two questions. Are these also de minimis value, 500 or less?
All but 3 of them. 3 of them are.
But
a
by
little-
statute, that's not a requirement or an
Yeah.
authority.
It's either or would allow you for private negotiation, non-buildable or under 500.
So these could be not buildable and worth, I'm going to exaggerate to make a point, and worth 100,000. You could still sell them as non-buildables with
Yes.
direct private negotiation,
Yes,
but you probably wouldn't if they had that much value.
yes.
Okay, and does the statute only allow this private negotiation with adjoining properties?
No, so that does not specify that. It just says private, it could be sold at a private negotiation. Adjoining properties is not specified in the language, but that is our intent to send the letters to the adjoining owners.
So they could be sold to anyone,
Correct.
okay? As could the 11 properties in item A that we just approved.
Yes.
Correct. All right, let me double check the other one. So no, the $500 ones has to be to the adjoining owners. The non-buildable ones, it does not specify.
Thanks for the clarity. I knew they were different.
Yep.
I couldn't remember which one, so I wasn't going to call you out on it, but thank
No,
you for clarifying.
absolutely.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-064 as presented.
Second discussion.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-064 with discussion. Commissioner Peck.
You're doing these by private negotiation, but it doesn't stop you from advertising in a variety of forms, including sending letters to whomever you think might be interested.
That is correct.
And you've done that to adjoining properties?
So right now, the way these even came forward is we've had owners that are either using the land that are by it or just depending on the situation, reach out. And anytime anybody submits an application interested in the property, we have to bring this in front of the board before we could even start any process. And so our intent is to send these to adjoining owners with and this we can't necessarily make it a requirement, but with an intention being of if you purchase this property, you would have to merge it with your current parcel. That would prevent from this occurring down the road, because what we found in practice is these sliver of lands that are usually like a little fence line or a little tiny corner on a lot that's already being utilized by a parcel. For whatever reason, they'll pay the taxes on the main parcel, but they forget that they have a little corner or something that's a different parcel, and then 3 years down the road we're facing the same issue again. It goes into foreclosure. It's an expense to the county to go through the process. We foreclose on it. It becomes tax title because nobody bids on it, because nobody usually in practice, I can't speak always. Sure. People are not interested in a little corner or a little lawn strip that goes in front of somebody's house.
Yeah, a remnant.
Yeah.
A piece that's broken off. You said something interesting there, and I want to clear up something. You're talking to adjacent property owners, and you said it's a requirement for these remnants, once purchased, to be co-joined or
Not a
added.
requirement, it's a.
Well, but I think you said we're requiring them to, so that's what I want to drill down on. Is it a requirement, and if so, where does it come from?
No, it's not a requirement, so I misspoke if that's how I said it. I thought
Okay.
we want to make it a recommendation. It would be the better word.
I might have misunderstood. I did hear you say it has to come to the board for this approval, which we're doing, but there is no requirement to adjoin it that I'm aware of.
No,
And
there
that's
is not.
why I earlier asked the question. You could sell it to adjoining properties or anybody else.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
somebody else who's not adjoining physically couldn't adjoin it. That's where I saw the disconnect. So thank you for clarifying that. So it does not have to be joined to an adjacent property. Anybody who's interested could buy it.
Yep.
And you can do it through private negotiation. And if anyone's interested, all they'd have to do is call you or send you a letter.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And then they also could go through the process of merging it with the property they already own, so they get one tax liability?
Yep. And that's our intent, again, that we cannot make that a requirement. That's our recommendation.
Right, but you will recommend that to them?
Yep. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, there's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-064. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Move down to C.
Okay, and then C is the one where it has all the parcels that the value is above 500 and they are deemed buildable. Some of them are very limited on what can be built on them, but they are still deemed buildable. Therefore, they have to be open to a public auction, just like a foreclosure sale would. And so our intent with these is to put them up for auction once we go through the proper requirements of posting and going through all those hoops. Questions?
Not seeing any others, so could you just tell us where an individual interested in perhaps buying these properties would look for the information?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have any auction information on the Franklin County Treasurer's website, whether it's foreclosure, whether it's tax title properties, and we use a vendor that we work with. That there's going to be a link as far as the information for our bidding, but everything is on our Franklin County Treasurer's website. So you're more than
Great.
welcome to come there.
That's our first free advertisement right there.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, move for approval of Resolution 2023-065 as presented in the matter of resale of 15 tax title properties.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-065. Without further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. So next we move down to D.
So I guess I'll go.
Yeah, present,
D
please.
is a parcel that we put a standalone. There's been a lot of questions about it, interest and whatnot. So we put it on a separate resolution for the purpose of a further discussion if the board so chooses and more clarity. This is a parcel that we believe might need more research on, and so we didn't want this to hold up the whole package deal, but besides that, I'm entertaining questions.
Questions, commissioners?
I'm just refreshing my memory, looking back at the resolution that was included. Yeah, the resolution is actually asking the board to direct the sale of this property, not further discussion, but I appreciate the forbearance. So this, as has already been mentioned briefly, is an area that the county has used as a laydown yard for a variety of materials and for excess concrete that they weren't ready to dispose of. Some of them are actual bridge deck sections, very large objects. And as Public Works has alluded, our ability to store gravel in these kinds of locations is diminishing. It's not growing. So I just wanted to get on the record that I think that this is a fairly high-value location for the county, and that we'd be wise to hang on to it. It reduces our costs in terms of being able to stage gravel down in the southern end of the county as opposed to just up in the northern end. So it's pretty valuable piece. But I also wanted to note that we've undertaken an effort to try and build a fund for the county to expand its campus. In other words, to sell off excess assets like the Wilson House that we just sold and some other properties that probably we no longer need. With that in mind, this particular piece of property actually crosses, I think it's Columbia River Road. That's probably not. Yeah, it probably is. Anyway, there's about 1.5 acres of this parcel that are actually down along the river shore, which to my knowledge, we've never used for this storing of materials and sand and gravel for the kinds of purposes that the county has. So I think one of the options that ought to be discussed is dividing that parcel, that 1.5 acres or 2 acres that's on the river side of the road is highly marketable. And again, I don't see us having a public works function for that. And then we could retain the remainder of it. It's a 26.5 acre parcel overall, so there's 25 acres of gravel laydown, but I don't think we need that piece by the river. So I think that's an option that ought to be discussed.
And I just want to add to that, to be clear with the way that parcel currently is, it's not a Franklin County asset, so we would not be able to divide it or do anything with it as it's currently in tax title property. However, there's avenues that could be discussed as far as there's RCWs, what allows it to become a county asset.
And it's times like this that your expertise helps keep us from looking silly. So thanks for that, and I'd be interested in hearing more about how we can do that. So I think it's probably a good path. Mr. Chairman, thanks for allowing discussion on that. I would propose or move that we table this for future consideration after we have more information.
Been a motion to table it.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to table it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Great job on your presentation. Next, we'll move down to item E, the inter-budget transfer of $50,000 from the current expense to sheriff's correction budget. Matter. He left, huh? He left, yeah. So he's leaving it with you? Monty? We need somebody up here. Get in the hot seat. You might want to pull the mic closer to you.
I'll sit here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything you want to present on this? It's for corrections.
It is for the correction side of the house, and to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with, I know there was some expenses that were not covered that essentially they're asking to be covered now. I think one of the insurance part of it wasn't completely covered, if I'm understanding this right.
We got questions from commissioners?
I'd just note that the read-ahead says the Sheriff's Corrections Department has run out of budget for the 2022 fiscal year, and the biggest factor in the shortfall is under-budgeting of professional services medical fees. $180,000 was transferred, but that alone was not enough to cover the remaining invoices. So these appear to me to be must-pays because we have a legal requirement to provide these services in the jail. The services appear to have been provided, so I don't think we have any choice, we the county, to pay them. But I will say that I'm concerned about the continuing stream of requests from the overall sheriff's department saying we under budgeted this and this and this and we need more money. And I think it would be useful for us as a team to look at whether or not we actually under budgeted or whether costs have skyrocketed. It's very difficult sometimes in 10% inflation to predict what your costs are actually going to be. So I think we need to know, did we not budget carefully enough? Did we under budget, or is it just inflation or a combination of the two? But bottom line, I don't know that we have a choice but to pay these. I see them as must pays under the law.
Did you?
I would agree with that.
You would agree with that? My question is that, we've come into quite a few here, and I asked the auditor's office to please present the over budgeting of the department this year, and so far we're at $750,000 with this, and then there's another ask. We're going to be at 810. My question is, have we factored these into our 2023 budget?
I think we do to the best of our ability. I think
These have
some-
been added into the 2023 budget, or are we still at the same budget as 2022?
I think the projection is essentially an educated guess as to what the increase may be, is where we're at, so.
And I guess my concern is that we all know we're heading into some turbulent times here with this inflation rate and stuff, and I think that we're all going to have to be very, as we are out there on the farms, we got to keep a close eye on our budgets so that we don't have these cost overruns, because in the farming community, you don't last very long if you run over budget. So as taxpayer and as the taxpayer spokesperson, I'm asking that we factor in and try to keep our budgets as tight as we can and limit our overruns, is what I'm asking. And so my question still stands, and I was hoping the sheriff was going to be here this morning to see if we have factored these in for next year's budget for 2023, if we have factored these in, or are we still at the same budget levels as 2022, which we're finding ourselves overrunning. And that's my question. I guess we need the sheriff, but these are expenses that we got to pay, so.
Mr. Chairman, because of the size of the amount, I think you said 750,000 so far this year, for the sake of the county's budget, for the fiscal health of the sheriff's department, maybe it'd be a good idea if the board was to ask the auditor's office to do something we might call a 5-year look back, take the last 5 years of the sheriff's budget and do some analysis of it to give us a better idea of whether or not our budgeting is keeping up with inflation, or whether we're flatlining the budget and inflation is killing us. But there's got to be a better answer than the way we're doing it now. So
Exactly.
I'd propose some sort of a request to the auditor to do, like I said, maybe a 5-year look-back analysis.
And I see he was just in here but left, but that would be a good analysis to look at, is 5 years back. I just went back to 21 and was looking at those. And of course, we've okayed all these as commissioners, so we're not putting this on the sheriff's department. We have okayed them, and one of them was $450,000 for the new vehicles, which are becoming harder to get. And we've had some accidents and we've had some problems with some of the vehicles we've had. So I know that we've okayed that. So maybe this is a discussion for another meeting with the sheriff president and the auditor's office for a 5-year look back. So with that,
I would add, Mr. Chairman, I'm not suggesting that it's anybody's fault, the sheriff's office or anybody else. You're correct that we did okay these budgets. As the old saying goes, G.I.G.O., right? Garbage in, garbage out. The quality of our decisions is based on the quality of the information that we have to work with. And I frankly couldn't tell you at this point why it is that we find ourselves in arrears on all these budgets. So this is not about saying you guys didn't budget well. We approved them, as you said. There may be other factors none of us have thought of, and that's why I think getting the professionals in the auditor's office to help us sort it out is a good idea.
and I think that two of the factors on this is insurance and medical, and those are two that are unpredictable. As we've seen in our insurance policies, they're all going up.
Right.
In the private sector and in government, and the other is medical, which is, yeah, so these are things that need to be factored, but I think a 5-year analysis would be good, and look forward to doing that. So is there any other comment? Do we have a motion?
No, that sounds like a good idea to me, so
Yep. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the board can do it by consensus, but if you'd like to
Oh,
do
no,
it through
that's-
motion, go ahead.
Go ahead. Consensus is fine with me.
Well, there's a resolution 2023-067.
There's a resolution.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the recommendation to the auditor's office, a request for a 5-year. I think we can just do that through the county administrator.
Yeah.
And as for the resolution, please go ahead.
Move to approve Resolution 2023-067 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for 2023-067. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Monty.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for taking the hot seat on that one. All right. Next, we'll move down to,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
we skipped over one line item, discussion about the county's portion of the tax title proceeds.
Oh, excuse me. Fund 325, yes.
When the treasurer goes about selling these tax title properties, a portion of those revenues does come to the county. We do have a new established, as Commissioner Peck has referred to earlier in the meeting. I think by simple, a motion would be suffice. Normally, that goes into, those proceeds would go into current expense, but if, with the board's permission, we'd like to put those funds into that newly created fund.
325, and I think a consensus will satisfy that.
Because this is a fiscal matter and we're committing funds, I would be more comfortable with a motion. So I'd be happy to move for board authority for the county administrator to secure any proceeds available from items A, B, and C on today's agenda. These are the sale of tax title properties. For proceeds from that as available to be entered into the Courthouse Expansion Fund 325.
Second.
So this would be resolution 2023, no resolution?
No, just motion.
Okay, just a motion and a second. So we got a motion and a second for these funds from A, B, and C to moved into Fund 325. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Now, if I understand this, we don't not have to have a public hearing, correct, on declaring county-owned property as surplus in Public Works Department? Is that a public hearing, or do we need a public hearing? Because there was some discrepancy on this before the meeting.
County engineer might, is it public here?
When there are items that are above $2,500, I believe it's by RCW, we're required to have a public hearing.
Okay. Okay, for that matter, then I'll open the public meeting for declaring county-owned property as surplus in Public Works Department. Go ahead, Mr. Erdman.
Okay, this, of course, is for the surplus declaration of county-owned property by motor vehicle, county road, sheriff's department, and the HAPA Center. As I stated earlier, this is required when an item reaches the threshold of $2,500. And there's a list before the board of the materials. I have Mrs. Stark from the Public Works Office who can answer any specific questions about the procedure or the items.
Was there any questions?
As I recall in a read aheads, excuse me, there's some recommendations for how these are to be surplused and sold. It's at auction. Is that right?
Yeah, go ahead, right there.
If I may speak to that, in the read-aheads, I put that it would be for, there's 3 different options based on the value of these items, and it's by public auction, recycle, or disposal. And some of these items are not something that probably would sell at auction.
Right.
And so our fleet manager is working with the auction company to determine that. And just as information for you, I consolidated all of these together in one action for efficiency. If you prefer that not happen in the future, that's okay, but I'm trying to be as efficient with my time as possible, so they were
Sure.
all combined.
Are the rules for resale, disposal, and surplus can and do vary with the value for sure, and sometimes the types of equipment.
Yes.
And so that would be one concern about joining them all together, is you have different means of disposing of these. But I would like to ask about, you mentioned you're in negotiations with the auction company. How do you determine, because I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, half a dozen different vehicles, among other things, right? Some fairly high-value assets. How do you determine who you're going to have sell these for us?
Well, at this time, we are not set up to do an online auction, and there are a few auction companies within our local area. Booker Auction is one that we have utilized in the past, and we've also used, I believe there's one in Pasco on 4th Street. And our
There's also a fairly large auto surplus used auto auction by the airport, too.
That is true, yes. And I believe that our fleet manager has looked at all of those. And for any that are associated with this particular resolution, we do have an agreement at this time with Booker Auction because of some of the equipment that is going there. I don't believe those are items that the other auction houses regularly market in.
Well, not to get too deep into it, but there are at least 3, if not more, auction houses, and I can offer firsthand knowledge that all of them sell all of these materials.
Okay.
So I think given that there's a half a dozen vehicles, there's some other fairly good-sized equipment here, that this probably rises to the level where we ought to send a notice out and ask them to give us a proposal as to what they'd like to do with them, what they would propose.
And I can't speak for our fleet manager, but I will pass that along to him, and he may have already done that.
Well, that would be great. Anytime the value gets to the point where it requires a public hearing, I think that ought to be a flag to us that perhaps we should be making equal opportunity to all the various companies that we have historically used. And they're all great companies. They can all handle this, but...
And I do believe he does that. However, I do not have documentation if we need to table this so that I can obtain that information for you.
Well,
I'm certain
I think we
do
need
so.
to do that, and if you can affirm for us that that's what they're doing, then I think we're great. We can move forward, no problem.
Okay.
But if we're not doing that, then I think we have an issue. So I'm just reading back through it to see if there's anything here that speaks to the method of disposal. Mr. Erdman, do you have any additional insight on this?
No, I currently don't. I'll get with the fleet manager and Mrs. Starkin will determine that. Generally, I would say just speaking off the top of my head, the auction house will give us a determination whether anything has any value. That which doesn't have any value will be disposed of as...
Surely, yes. Yeah, and you've already spoken to that, and I'm just talking about the items that have enough value that we have to have a public hearing about them, right? I mean, that should sort of be a red flag.
And I do a market analysis on all of the items prior to putting items together so that we do have an idea of what's going where, and it's not just willy-nilly.
Yeah, and if I said anything that sounded like that, apologies. No, you've combined them, you've explained why, it's efficiency. I'm just pointing out that when there's enough value in a package that we need to have a public hearing, then we need to have an open public opportunity to hire somebody to sell these items.
Certainly,
So
yes.
that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
And in order to get to that $2,500 limit, we have done a collective of all these items together, correct?
No.
No, those were certain items, and I'll let Mrs. Stark speak to that, but there was, I believe, from the sheriff's department.
It's an individual
Item? So one of the
Mm-hmm.
cars is worth $2,500 then? Probably the,
Yeah, and as far as the HAPO items,
yeah.
it's really unknown.
Well, if they don't run, they're not worth a lot.
Right, but who knows with these other items? That's really for an auction house to
Yes.
really give us a good idea if they are.
And I think Booker Auction is probably one of the best that they have dealt with all of these items at their sales, so they would be a good consultant, as probably would be Musser too.
And I think there's a third auction house in town that routinely sells these kinds of things, and I think you're correct, they're on 20th. And there may be another one on 4th that I'm not aware of, but these are all tax-paying citizens in our county, and they're small businesses, and they should all have an equal shot. Thanks.
Absolutely.
So we are in open public meeting, and it's open to the public, so is there any public comment on this? Hearing none, I'll close the open public meeting, and I guess we will table this if that's the consent of the board.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would request that Public Works come back to us after they've notified the various professional service providers in the community that they feel are suitable, and just bring us those proposals with their recommendation as to what we should use, how we should go about it.
All right, so we'll table it until you come back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Administration office business, Mr. Davidson.
Yes, Chairman, next item is McKinstry, the firm that's working for us out at the HAPO Center on so much repairs and HVAC and so on and so forth, has come to us with an interesting proposal that we seek some grants for some solar work. And I've asked Shirley Jones, who's basically my liaison for most things that are going on at HAPO, to give us a presentation on that. So,
You've received the read-ahead on this. Basically, what it is that the Department of Commerce has issued a request for application, and it's for solar plus storage for resilient communities. It's competitive grants. They have $35,394,000 and change available. And the purpose of that they've set up is related to deploying solar and battery storage systems in community buildings in Washington to enhance grid resiliency, as well as provide backup power for community buildings to support critical needs. Again, Lance Funk and Christy Hoffpower from McKinstry, who is working on our HVAC system out at HAPO, brought this to our attention. We do have a deadline of March 23rd to get this application in. They are, I set up the portal. They are working on gathering quite a bit of information. We met with emergency services or emergency management with Sean and Chris. We also called the health district and spoke with Sierra there. They also touch bases with Red Cross. What we were trying to do is come about this with the HAPO Center potentially, and I know this has been discussed in previous years, but using them for an emergency site, should any disaster happen, anything, dealing with COVID, whatever the case may be. And so what this would do is the Department of Commerce grant would supply 70% of a project. And this project with the solar power, we're looking at solar panels on top of the expo portion of the HAPO Center. And they will supply 70% if we get this grant. And then also, it's including storage. So there would be a battery cell, which is the size of a railroad car, that would be on the ground. The solar panels themselves, because of the weight, we would need to hire a structural engineer for structural integrity for the roof to hold the solar panels. Now, in addition to this, that is 70% with that grant. There is a new Inflation Reduction Act tax incentive, which normally a county would not qualify for. However, with this particular project, this is new, and this is something that we would qualify for. They would also supply 30%. So what that gives us, my numbers here are 1,000 off, but what this gives us is about $2.14 million total for this project. In effect, what McKinstry would do is they would form their project to fit that value. So we would not get optimum as far as battery and such. I mean, a battery alone could be $1.5 million. But what this would do is it would get us partially along the way as far as energy efficiency. This was going to be a potential third phase for the HAPO Center, but it moves it forward, and it would be funds that we don't have to pay, but yet we would have potentially 10 to 12,000 a year in savings. The setup would be put together to where it would be available for expansion for future, to where other cells could be added, battery cells, and could potentially be a huge savings overall. But again, at this point in time, money-wise is important, and we just don't have, the 2 million, but it would be nice to get this grant and this tax credit to accommodate that, to where we could, in effect, have this project for free. The other thing is that this is something, in looking at the HAPO Center as an emergency site, in dealing with the Red Cross, emergency management, and then also the health district, the purpose of that is McKinstry is gathering information to find out what are the priorities, lighting, water, heat, cooling. There's different things, and it takes time, should something happen, for those entities to be able to come and set up. This battery cell that we're looking at is about 3 days worth of power. And so it helps us to get along the way until things, come together. So what we are looking for and asking for today is a consensus from the board to be able to, this structural engineer will be about $2,600 for that. And so that's what we're looking for, is a consensus to be able to move forward with this project, to complete an application. McKinstry's with us all the way on this, with data, filling everything out. But to be able to not only move forward with the application, but also the $2,600 for the structural engineer to do their part. A feasibility study will need to be done if we are approved, but that I asked about, that could be covered by the grant itself too.
Did you want to, they would come back to the board?
Oh, yes, I put that in here, but in a couple of weeks, McKinstry will come and present to all of you once they've collected the data, been able to put together a presentation.
That's when the final decision be made.
Yes. And again, with the timeline, in a couple of weeks really is about all they've got to be able to put everything together for you, because, again, the deadline is March 23rd.
Questions?
Does that allow enough time for the structural engineer to conduct the assessment?
Christy Hoffpower from McKinstry is on the line, and I'm sure that is part of what they're planning on, is to be able to accomplish that. Christy, I'm taking it that 2 weeks is enough to have the engineer come out for the assessment?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Barely.
What line is she on?
Yes, we talked to them,
three-
and they're
the
aware
2969.
of the need.
Shirley, you mentioned the 70% cost from Commerce, and you referenced a source for the other 30%, but I didn't catch it. You were talking about taxes, and then you said they would cover that 30.
This
So
is, yes, sorry. This is federal, and it is an Inflation Reduction Act tax incentive. It's new. It is still actually not fully detailed out,
okay.
but they will cover 30%.
And again, they is the federal, are you saying it's
Federal.
the federal government?
Yeah.
And are they going to pay that in money or in some sort of tax incentive, tax credit? Are they?
It's set up as a tax credit, or now,
Because
again,
to my
normally-
knowledge, we're not a federally taxable entity, so I guess my first request would be to make sure that those are saleable federal tax credits that could be somehow marketed. You know, typically you're not going to get a dollar for dollar, certainly, but you'll get some value off of it. But that's one of my questions is, you know, how are we really paying for that 30%?
Do you want me to answer that, Shirley?
You bet.
Yeah, please.
So obviously, you would want to talk to your legal team and any tax accountants that you have, because we're not able to give you tax or legal advice. But the documentation for the Inflation Reduction Act is that they are opening up what's always been a tax credit for tax-paying entities is now opened up, and they are monetizing that, and they are saying that it will come back to the local governments in the form of cash.
Okay, that's exactly the answer I was looking for. Never heard of them doing that before, but that's great.
They have not.
Yeah, they're monetizing the credit, so we don't have to go sell it on the secondary market for 50 cents on the dollar. We get the full value. So the federal government is paying that. Great.
Yes.
Good question. Already asked about timing for the structural engineer. Absolutely support the idea of HAPO as a emergency site shelter. Makes perfect sense. Centrally located. It's got the right facilities, the right space. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Happy to hear you're working with emergency management. They, as you know, have access to, they're sort of the grant gurus in my mind. Sean Davis over there, if anybody can find and get a grant, it's Sean. So that's good that you're working with them. The only other thing that really occurs to me at this point is back-end costs. What do we think the life is on this system, and when it's expired and we have to go remove it from the facility? I'm assuming that there's enough life on this system that we really don't need to be too concerned about that, and that the back-end costs are not crazy.
I think a lot of this is going to come down to waiting for the presentation as far as the details go.
Okay.
The life of solar panels, I'm not aware. Christy, are you aware?
Yeah, and I'm not aware if there's any special disposal requirements for them like there are, say, for example, with wind turbine blades, which is proving to be costly. So
I believe we're usually looking at 20-year life, but because this also has a battery, I would want to defer that to my technical team to really give an answer. The grant does require that it be used for 13 years, so as a reference point for that.
Christy, my question would be on that battery. That was where I was going to come to. Is there any liability for having that on the premises for a toxic? Batteries do have acid. Is this one big battery or multiple batteries? And what is the replacement? It's 1.5 million now, but what is the average life of these batteries to store that energy?
Yeah, that's a lot that I cannot answer, but I can tell you that we are in the process of trying to size it accurately. That's why we're trying to get a feel for which systems in the building would need to run and how long they would need to run. The truth is, there isn't enough money to put in a system that would power the entire building for the length of time that you would need. So we're trying to cover the critical systems on the expo side of the building for as long as possible, and then try to work that into the budget, because we know there's not additional money. So we kind of need to finish that analysis, and then we'd be able to tell you whether it's one battery or two batteries and how long they last, and answer some of those questions. Right now, we're just trying to make sure that we size it appropriately for the budget that you have.
Would there be any responsibility for the county to have insurance on this possible toxic leakage of batteries?
I think you would have to talk to somebody else for that.
Okay, thank you.
I know Lance had mentioned that there is a type of tray that fits underneath the battery itself for potential, any
leakage.
Yeah.
I'm just going to assume for now that the study in the proposal is going to answer those questions about what type of battery, what sort of risks, what sort of disposal. So,
Yeah, and definitely all part of the data, as Christy said. It's going to depend on what systems are needed. As far as lighting, there's going to be certain lighting that you don't need full-blown lighting. They would have it all set up in a system for emergency purposes only. So all of that, there's a lot of data that Lance is collecting to put all of this together and the right fit for what we're doing.
the 2,600 for the structural engineer would come from where? Is that a county coffers?
We were looking at non-departmental for that at this point.
Okay. I would imagine it's probably reimbursable too if we went forward, but.
Any other questions? Thank you, Shirley.
Okay, we're looking for a consensus as far as what, do we move forward with the application and then also the 2,600 for the structural engineer?
I would agree that we move forward with it. I look forward to the presentation.
So what do we incur in the way of expenses and obligations between now and the presentation proposal, just the 2,600?
Correct.
So McKinstry will do this prospectively on the hopes that this project comes home?
Correct.
Okay.
And if the project does come home, the 2,600 is reimbursable?
I would have to look into that part of it. I don't know. I know that I talked with Christy about the feasibility study itself can be a part of it. We can see what we can do about the other. No, I can't guarantee that it could be reimbursable.
Yeah. I support this next step to hear what the proposal is, and I think the 2,600 is not an expense that we were looking for right now, but I think it's pretty de minimis against the potential for a multi-million-dollar improvement.
Looks like you have the consensus of the board to move ahead.
Thank you.
Any other items on the agenda, Mr. Administrator? Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Please come forward. Anybody on the phone?
Nobody on the phone.
George Dockstetter, South Landing Road. I wanted to talk about three things. One, last week, there was a lot of discussion and dissent about the $150 fee for driveway permit. And Public Works said that that really didn't cover their cost. And a lot of people were worried that if they drove off the road onto their farm field, they'd have to get a driveway permit. My understanding from last week, it's only if you're going to go in and get a building permit do you need to get a driveway permit. And there's not a lot of that happening out in the county that is not already subdivisions that you've approved, where we've got all these housing projects that are in the county and still in the county as of right now, and $150 doesn't cover it. As much as I hate to see fees tagged on to new construction cost, let's up it to where we're recovering our cost on subdivisions when they go in for their permit fees. The second thing, on these tax sales, the treasurer's office said something about using the auction house that they've used in the past, and I'm assuming that's the one that's out of town that they've been using until we started using different people on the Wilson House. I'd like to see that stay in the county with our local businesses. And third, I was there last night and met the candidates for the administrator, and I don't know how you did it, but it looks to me like you came up with three pretty good candidates. And I wish you the best and hope for the best results when you pick one, but pick one that can handle the day-to-day stuff so the three of you could concentrate on what the future's going to look like for the county and not the day-to-day operations. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone? Seeing no other public comment, looks like we have a closed session first and then 2 executive sessions. So,
Mr. Chairman, request a closed session pursuant to RCW 4230-140, Section 4, contract negotiations. And Sam, how long?
okay, so we will recess into closed session for 5 minutes. Okay, we have come out of closed session. We're back to regular session at this time. Mr. Davidson, will you take us into executive session?
Chairman, we request an executive session pursuant to RCW 423110, Section 1, subsection I, potential litigation for 15 minutes.
4230, correct?
4230-110.
110, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, 42. At this time, we'll recess into executive session for 15 minutes. Test. We have came out of executive session and are going to extend for 15 more minutes.
So we'll be invited, all the elected officials and department heads are gonna come back in for that, right? Okay. Come back in.
Apparently so.
Yes, I did. Well, I was on
No,
that.
maybe not.
I mean, I'll be
I think
back
it's
in
just one.
3-4 minutes. So right in the men's room.
Yeah, I need to leave a little bit more.
The PEC says he'll be back in 3 or 4 minutes. Rocky, I'm stepping out, so can you call this exec session when it comes in? Can you call this exec session when it comes in? 'Cause I don't want to be part of it. I haven't been part of the discussion up to now, so.
Anything I need to do? Is there anything I need to do?
No,
Just call
it'll be
over.
open discussion, yeah. Oh, you just read this one. It's for,
Just read that.
G, I think.
Just say RCW 4231.10.1G.
Yeah.
Evaluate. All right.
Can we do a 5-minute?
How much time do you anticipate?
We have come out of executive session. We are back to regular session. We are going to take a 5-minute recess and reconvene in 5 minutes at 11:12.
Good.
All right, we're back to regular session. We're going to move into executive session, RCW 42.3.110, parentheses 1, parentheses G, evaluation qualification of applicant for employee or review performance of public employee. And what are we talking for time?
Let's start with 20 minutes.
20 minutes, and we're going into executive session at 1:14.
And Mr. Chair, just a note, it's 4230. The printing on your sheet is incorrect.
Oh.
Just for the record.
4230. 4230.110, parentheses 1, parentheses G. We're going into executive session at 14:30. When we come out of executive session, we're going to extend for another 15 minutes under the same RCW, and at this time, we'll recess back to executive session. you guys think, for how long?
I think 15 anyway.
Go ahead.
For how long?
I'd say 15 or 20. This is one of the bigger decisions we're
Yep.
going to make.
Okay, we're out of executive session. We're going to extend for another 15 minutes. Same RCW. We need the door, yeah. It'll be a quick one.
What's that?
It'll be a quick one on Friday. Do I announce the meeting today?
Yeah, no?
No.
We don't know if Sam's available, we don't.
Okay. Okay, we've come out of executive session. We are back to regular session. And at this time, is there any other business for the good of the county?
Did
Harry?
you have a question on the life flight? Or did you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer yet. He's looking into it to see if a fire chief can call for life flight.
I was told they can.
They can? By,
That's, the deception is, people think they get life flight, they call life flight, they come pick them up.
No.
No, they have to have pre-authorization.
yes, there has to be somebody there, the accreditation, to make sure that you need life
They don't
flight.
have a sprained ankle.
Yeah. And in life flight, if it's severe winds, they won't fly.
Right.
So it's not always available.
And if a fire chief calls, I wonder who's obliged to pay the bill, the patient or the city?
Exactly. Well, if you should have insurance for it, and if you don't have insurance, then who pays? Exactly. So is there any?
That was the way it was explained to me, that if you subscribe to life flight, that you're basically buying an insurance policy for them to come get you.
Yes.
Okay.
So with that, if there's no other business for the good of the county, this meeting is adjourned.